Have you ever noticed how difficult it can be to say one small word? No. Not because you don't know what you want. Not because you don't have the right to refuse. But because the moment you even think about saying no, your chest tightens, your stomach knots, and shame rises like a wave. So instead, you say yes. Yes to one more favor at work. Yes to a family obligation you didn't want. Yes to a friend who drains your energy. And on the surface, it seems harmless. You're being kind, agreeable, helpful. But underneath, another story is unfolding. Each yes you didn't mean becomes a weight on your back. Each yes chips away at your boundaries. Each yes teaches others that your time, your energy, even your soul are available on demand. Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest burden for the child is the unlived life of the parents. But many of us carry another burden too. The unspoken contract that to be loved, we must always be agreeable. Where did we learn this? Often in childhood. When you said no as a child, what happened? Maybe your parents sighed in disappointment. Maybe your teacher scolded you. Maybe your peers laughed. So you learned no equals rejection. No equals shame. No means love might be withdrawn. And so you adapted. You said yes to stay safe. You said yes to stay loved. You said yes to survive. This is what John Payne, in his work on simplicity parenting, observed in families, that many children grow up with an atmosphere of clutter, not only in toys and schedules, but in expectations. When a child senses that saying no will disrupt harmony, they bury their authentic response. The habit of compliance begins early. But what happens when that child grows up? They become the adult who cannot refuse, the colleague who takes on extra work while others rest, the friend who never sets limits, the partner who quietly absorbs resentment. On the outside, they look dependable. On the inside, they are quietly drowning. Think of a time when you said yes, but every cell in your body wanted to say no. Maybe it was staying late at the office, even though you were exhausted. Maybe it was agreeing to host family when you longed for rest. Maybe it was lending money, time, or attention you didn't truly have. Do you remember the sensation, the resentment that followed? That is the cost of yes. Psychologists sometimes call this the fawn response, the survival instinct where, instead of fighting or fleeing, you appease. You agree. You surrender. It looks polite, it looks cooperative, but in truth it's fear disguised as kindness. And the tragedy is this: the more we say yes to avoid rejection, the further we drift from ourselves. Carl Rogers, one of the great humanistic psychologists, said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. But how can we accept ourselves if every no we swallow teaches us that our authentic self is unacceptable?" This is the double bind of shame. We want to be true, but we also want to be loved. And somewhere in our past, we learned we cannot have both. Consider Anna. She is 35 years old, with 2 children, a demanding job, and a partner who often works late. Her schedule is full, her energy stretched thin. One Friday, a colleague asks if she can organize the office event, a role she has done many times before. Inside, Anna's whole being screams, no. She longs for a weekend of rest. But what does she say? Yes, of course. She smiles as she agrees, but inside, she feels a small betrayal. A betrayal not by her colleague, but by herself. John Payne describes this pattern as part of the undeclared war against overwhelm. We push, we agree, we take on too much, and we believe the enemy is outside, the demands of others, the busyness of the world. But often, the war is inside, a war against our own inability to say no. Each time we fail to refuse, we reinforce the pattern. And over time, we no longer even know what a true yes feels like. Jung might call this the problem of individuation, the process of becoming whole. To individuate, we must separate from the parental voices, the cultural expectations, the inner critic that demands obedience. We must learn to say, "This is mine, this is not, this I accept, this I refuse." But shame stands in the way. Shame whispers, if you say no, you will lose love. If you set a boundary, you are selfish. If you put yourself first, you are bad. And so we hesitate. But here is the paradox. Every no that is rooted in self-respect is also a yes to something deeper. When you say no to overwork, you say yes to rest. When you say no to toxic demands, you say yes to dignity. When you say no to chaos, you say yes to peace. The problem is not that we don't know how to say no. The problem is that we have been taught to feel ashamed when we do. Imagine a man standing in a room. Around him, dozens of hands point, accusing. How dare you refuse? Who do you think you are? He stands still, silent, calm, because he knows their voices are echoes of the past. But his no belongs to the present. This is where we begin. In this video, we will explore why saying no feels so dangerous, why shame attaches itself to boundaries, and how reclaiming the right to refuse is not selfishness, but sanity. We will look at the childhood roots of compliance, the cultural scripts that glorify self-sacrifice, and the psychological cost of living without limits. And most importantly, we will begin to imagine what it might feel like to finally say no without shame. Because the truth is simple. Without the courage to refuse, there can be no authentic yes. So let me ask you, when was the last time you said yes while meaning no? And what would it mean today, right now, to give yourself permission to speak the truth? In that small word, no, a whole life begins. If saying no is such a small word, why does it feel so heavy? The answer lies not in the present moment, but in the patterns of the past. For many of us, the fear of saying no comes from childhood. A parent who took refusal as defiance, a teacher who demanded obedience, a culture that praised the good child who did what they were told. These early experiences taught us something dangerous, that boundaries are not safe. When a child says no, they are not just rejecting a task. They are asserting their separateness, their independence, their right to choose. But if that no is punished, mocked, or ignored, the child learns to bury it. They internalize the lesson, agree, or risk rejection. Over time, the body remembers. Even decades later, an adult faced with the chance to say no may feel the same wave of guilt, the same anxiety, the same reflex to comply. Carl Jung described complexes as feeling-toned ideas, patterns charged with emotion that overwhelm our conscious will. The fear of saying no is one such complex. On the surface, it is a simple choice, but underneath it triggers a flood of old emotions. Guilt, shame, fear of abandonment. That is why the struggle feels so much larger than the situation deserves. You are not just refusing a request, you are reliving every moment you were told that your refusal was unacceptable. John Payne has written about the hidden curriculum of family life, the unspoken rules that shape children far more than official lessons. One of these rules often sounds like, be agreeable at all costs. A child who absorbs this rule may never hear it in words, but they feel it in the atmosphere, and as adults, they carry it into workplaces, friendships, and marriages. Think about how this shows up. At work, you agree to one more project even though your desk is full. In relationships, you tolerate behavior that crosses your limits. In friendships, you remain silent when you should speak. And each time you avoid saying no, the belief is reinforced. Boundaries are dangerous. This is why no feels so threatening, not because of the present, but because of the past. The irony is that the very word that could set you free is the one you fear most. Psychologist Harriet Lerner once said, "Anger is a signal, and one worth listening to." In the same way, so is resistance. That small voice inside that whispers, "I don't want this." That is the signal of your authentic self. When you override it, you silence the very compass that could guide you toward wholeness. But here's the twist. The fear of saying no is not only about others, it is also about how we see ourselves. Many of us have internalized the identity of the helper, the peacemaker, the dependable one. Saying no feels like a betrayal of who we believe we must be. And so we choose the comfort of identity over the discomfort of truth. Yet Jung reminds us that individuation requires tension. To grow, we must confront the parts of ourselves that cling to old roles. The role of the good child, the good colleague, the good partner. Saying no becomes more than refusal. It becomes transformation. Imagine this. A woman sits at a table piled high with requests. Each piece of paper represents a demand on her time. Around her stand faceless figures, waiting. In the past, she would have picked up every paper, smiling as she complied. But today, she pushes the pile away. She does not explain. She does not justify. She simply says no. The silence is heavy. The figures shift uncomfortably. But the woman breathes more deeply than she has in years. This is the moment when no becomes not just a refusal, but a declaration of existence. Here's where I'd like you to pause for a moment. Think of your own life. What is one situation, right now, where you long to say no but haven't? It could be small, like declining an invitation, or it could be larger, like resisting pressure at work or within your family. Hold it in your mind. And if you feel safe, share it in the comments with 3 simple words. This is mine. Not to expose yourself, but to acknowledge it, to take the first small step of owning your boundary. You'll discover quickly that you are not alone. Many others are struggling with the same invisible weight. Because the truth is, every time you say no authentically, you're not only protecting yourself, you're also giving others permission to do the same. You become a model of what Jung called individuation, living as your whole self rather than as a mask. We will explore this further in the next part, where we look at how culture itself reinforces the shame of saying no, and why self-sacrifice is so often mistaken for virtue. But for now, remember this. No is not the end of love. It is the beginning of respect. If this journey eases something inside you, stay with us. Subscribe, and each step will bring a little more clarity. Thank you. If childhood teaches us that no is dangerous, culture reinforces the lesson. We live in societies that glorify selflessness. The good employee is the one who stays late. The good friend is the one who is always available. The good partner is the one who puts the other first, no matter the cost. And the good parent is the one who never thinks of themselves at all. These are powerful ideals. They appear noble. They sound virtuous. But behind them lies a shadow. Because when self-sacrifice becomes the highest good, boundaries become the greatest sin. Consider how often you have heard phrases like, "Don't be selfish. Be a team player. Family comes first. They need you." At first, these sound harmless, but repeated over years, they shape a script that tells you your worth is measured by what you give, not by who you are. Jung warned that when the collective dominates, the individual is diminished, and in many ways, our culture trains us to diminish ourselves. Saying yes is celebrated, Saying no is condemned. But let's look closer. What actually happens when you always say yes? At work, you become indispensable, but also invisible. People stop seeing your limits. They assume you will absorb whatever they hand you. Your willingness becomes a trap. In relationships, you become reliable, but also resentful. You give and give, but inside you feel unseen, even used. And because you never set limits, others may never realize they've crossed them. With family, the script is often the heaviest. Cultural traditions can make it seem as though refusing an obligation is a betrayal of love itself. Many adults feel torn between caring for aging parents, supporting siblings, or maintaining appearances, while their own lives quietly erode. This is not love. It is duty masquerading as devotion. And yet, culture rarely celebrates the one who says no. It celebrates the martyr. John Payne points out that in our performance culture, children, and later adults, are often pressured to excel, to participate, to prove themselves constantly. Downtime, refusal, and rest are treated as laziness. And so the habit of overcommitment becomes generational. Parents overfill their schedules, children inherit the pace, and no one learns the art of a simple boundary. The irony is that cultures which praise endless giving are often the most exhausted. Burnout is not a personal failing. It is the natural outcome of a system that rewards self-erasure. But here's the paradox. Every culture that glorifies self-sacrifice also secretly depends on boundaries. No society can function without limits. Every law, every structure, every agreement is a form of no. So why is it that on a collective level we accept boundaries, but on a personal level we feel ashamed of them? Because boundaries expose vulnerability. When you say no, you admit you have limits. And in a culture that worships productivity, limits feel like weakness. Yet Jung would argue the opposite, that individuation requires us to confront our limits honestly, to say, this is as far as I can go. True strength is not boundless energy. True strength is the wisdom to rest, to refuse, to protect the self so it can flourish. Let me give you an example. David works in finance. He is praised for his dedication, his reliability, his willingness to take on extra projects. For years, he never refused. But slowly, his health began to deteriorate. Insomnia, headaches, fatigue. Finally, his doctor warned him, "Continue like this, and you are heading toward collapse." In that moment, David realized that every yes had been silently killing him. The culture of self-sacrifice had masked itself as ambition, but beneath it, there was only depletion. His first no was small, declining an extra meeting, then another. At first, colleagues were surprised, even critical, but eventually, something shifted. People began to respect his time more. His work did not diminish. It improved. Boundaries, far from destroying his career, preserved it. This is the hidden truth culture rarely teaches. No is not the enemy of love, or work, or community. No is what makes them sustainable. Think about your own life. Where has culture trained you to equate no with failure? Is it in your job, where refusing seems like weakness? Is it in your family, where refusal feels like betrayal? Or is it in your friendships, where saying no feels like abandonment? I want to invite you to reflect, and if you feel comfortable, share one phrase in the comments. This is where I struggle. Not to confess, but to connect. You will discover how many others feel the same weight, and in that recognition, something loosens. Because the first step in reclaiming no is realizing you are not alone. This struggle is not just personal, it is cultural. And if culture can shape us, then culture can also be reshaped, one boundary at a time. In the next part, we will go deeper into the inner battle, the shame that rises even when we know no is the right answer. We will explore why guilt lingers, how to recognize it, and what it means to carry both love and refusal in the same breath. For now, remember this: boundaries are not barriers. They are the frame that allows life to hold its shape. Without them, everything collapses. With them, everything becomes possible. By now, we can see that the difficulty of saying no is not simply about the request in front of us. It is about the history behind us. Childhood patterns, cultural scripts, and complexes woven deep into our psyche. But even when we understand this, a problem remains. The moment we try to say no, shame shows up. It arrives like a knot in the stomach, a voice in the head, a heaviness in the chest. Shame says, "You are selfish. You are ungrateful. You are disappointing someone." And so, even when we know what we want, we silence ourselves. Jung described shame as one of the guardians of the unconscious, a force that protects what has been repressed. When shame rises, it signals that we are brushing against old wounds. To say no is to threaten the identity we built to stay safe. The identity of the good child, the dependable one, the giver. This is why it feels so overwhelming. You're not only refusing someone else, you're refusing the mask you have worn for decades. But here's the paradox. Shame can be a doorway. If we stay with it, if we learn to name it, it loses some of its power. Brené Brown has written that shame cannot survive being spoken. When we admit, "I feel selfish for saying no," something shifts. We recognize the voice for what it is, a relic of the past, not a truth of the present. So how do we work with shame in practice? First, we notice. The next time you're about to say yes, pause. Pay attention to your body. Where do you feel the pull? Is it in your stomach, your chest, your throat? This is the place shame lives. Instead of rushing past it, stay with it. Breathe into it. Recognize. This is shame, not truth. Second, we name it. You might even say quietly to yourself, "I'm afraid of disappointing them." By naming it, you bring it into awareness, and in awareness, it softens. Third, we test it. Ask yourself, if I say no, what will actually happen? Often the consequences are far smaller than the fear suggests. Many times, the world adjusts. The relationship survives. The task is picked up by someone else. Fourth, we practice. Boundaries are like muscles. The more we use them, the stronger they become. Start small. Decline a minor request. Cancel a small commitment. Each successful no teaches your nervous system that refusal is safe. Finally, we reframe. Every no is also a yes. A no to exhaustion is a yes to rest. A no to manipulation is a yes to dignity. A no to clutter is a yes to simplicity. John Payne reminds us that simplicity, in schedules, in possessions, in commitments, is what creates room for connection and joy. Saying no is not deprivation, it is spaciousness. Let me give you an example. Maria had always agreed to family obligations, even when they drained her. One year, exhausted from work, she decided not to host the holiday dinner. She felt guilty, ashamed, even afraid of rejection, but she held her ground. The result? Her sister stepped in. The family still gathered, and for the first time in years, Maria enjoyed the holiday without collapsing from exhaustion. Her no was not a rejection of family. It was an affirmation of self. And in the end, it strengthened the relationships rather than breaking them. This is the paradox of boundaries. What feels selfish is often what allows genuine connection to flourish. Without boundaries, resentment builds. With them, respect grows. So where do we begin? Not with a dramatic confrontation, not with a sudden rebellion, but with small, steady acts of truth. Each no is a rehearsal for the life you want to live. I'd like to invite you to reflect. What is one area of your life where you could experiment with a small no? Not a life-changing refusal, but a gentle one. A request you can decline without catastrophe. If you feel comfortable, share it in the comments with the phrase, "This is my practice." You'll find others experimenting too. And together, small steps build courage. Because the journey of saying no without shame is not about perfection. It is about practice. It is about reclaiming the right to draw a line and discovering that love does not vanish when you do. In the next and final part, we will bring these threads together. We will reflect on what it means to live with authentic boundaries and why learning to say no is also learning to say yes to yourself, to your truth, to your life. We have traveled through the weight of yes, the roots of compliance, the culture of self-sacrifice, and the shadow of shame. And here we arrive at the turning point, because saying no is not just about refusal. It is about truth. It is about finally giving yourself permission to live as you are, not as others expect you to be. Think about it. Every great act of growth begins with a number. No to what is false. No to what diminishes. No to what does not belong. The seed says no to the soil in order to push upward. The child says no to dependence in order to grow. The adult says no to illusion in order to live authentically. Without no, there is no yes that matters. Carl Jung often reminded us that individuation requires tension. To become whole, we must hold the conflict between pleasing others and being ourselves. It is not easy. At times, it feels unbearable. But it is in this tension that the true self is born. John Payne's vision of simplicity points to the same truth. Life becomes clearer, gentler, more spacious, not by adding more, but by refusing what does not serve. No becomes the path to simplicity. So here is the invitation. Begin with one number. Not a grand rebellion, not a dramatic declaration, just one small, honest refusal. Let it be your practice. Let it be your beginning. Because each no whispered with courage is a yes to dignity. Each no spoken calmly is a yes to freedom. Each no carried without shame is a yes to life. As we close, I'd like to ask you to take a step beyond listening. Think of the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Hold it in your mind. And if you feel safe, share a single sentence in the comments. This is where I want to say no. Not as confession, but as connection. When we name our struggles, we create a circle of recognition. And in that circle, shame begins to fade. And if this resonated with you, I encourage you to continue the journey. The next episode will take us deeper into the hidden dynamics that shape our choices and the freedom that comes when we step beyond them. Perhaps the next video will bring you the clarity you need. Perhaps it will offer the encouragement you have been waiting for. But you won't know until you take the next step.